I'd like to call this meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our third meeting of the Senate Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Secretary, please call the roll.
Senator Donate? Senator Pizzina?
Present.
Chair Wynn?
Here.
Thank you. Everyone is here today. Again, welcome to everyone to the committee. This is our third day and our final day of presentations. So on our agenda today, we have Nevada's Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. I don't even know how you say this acronym, but I'm just going to call it their Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. The Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, which I know we are all familiar with, as well as Nevada's Department of Transportation, which based on some of the other questions that were asked in previous committee meetings, I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for all three of these groups. So before we start, I'd like to make several housekeeping announcements. Just make sure that when you come up to the desk, I'll do the shortened version, state your name for the record, spell your name first and last. You don't have to do that every single time you talk, but just try to be aware of it. I know sometimes we go back and forth in presentations. Just remember that when you turn on that mic, it just helps out all of my staff if you can do that, and we want to make their lives easier because they make us look so good. Additionally, if you have any questions, or if you have any exhibits or you have anything that you weren't able to provide in the public comment at the end of the session, feel free to submit that in writing within 24 hours, and we will make sure all of the members get that. I know that I review all those documents, and I'm sure that all of my committee members also do that. When we get to public comment, please keep your comments to 2 minutes, just so we can make sure we get through this in a timely fashion. And again, back to the names. I know that most of us are very good at it. I know that I fail sometimes on this front as well, but again, please state your name for the record each and every time that you speak. And with that, we will begin the presentation, and we will start today, this afternoon, with the Nevada's Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. And I believe we have a couple people, including the chair. So if you guys all want to come up to the table and begin when you're ready. And I think we have Mr. Bennett, is that correct? In Las Vegas. I see him down there. Hopefully he can see me. I see him. So, and we have your PowerPoint presentation, which I am hoping that you are not going to read to us, but use as a guide. But I know that we all have access to that committee report and that PowerPoint presentation as well. So go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Julia Peek, Juliapeek, for the record, and I serve as the Deputy Administrator for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, and also the Vice Chair of the Nevada Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, and we do call that NVACS to make it easier. I am joined today in Carson City by Sandra Rosenberg, who serves as the Deputy Director for Nevada's Department of Transportation, and in Las Vegas, as you noted, we're joined by Andrew Bennett, who serves as the Chair of the NVACS and is the Director of the Clark County Office of Traffic Safety. We're going to switch off on the slide presentation, so I'll now hand it off to Director Bennett to start us off.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. For the record, my name is Andrew Bennett, and I have the privilege of solely being before you today as the chair of the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety, representing our over 20 member agencies. Senator Wynn, Senator Pizzina, members of the Senate Growth and Infrastructure Committee, thank you so much for having us present the work of the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. The goal today is to cover the who, what, when, where, and why of the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety. So to start with some high-level background, the Nevada Executive Committee on Traffic Safety was formed over 20 years ago to oversee the Nevada's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. And during the 81st session in 2021, NRS 408.581 was updated to reshape the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety to include over 20 incredible member agencies. And since that time, we've added some non-voting members to our committee. But the overall goal of the Nevada Advisory Committee on Traffic Safety is to have a one-stop shop of bringing together local agencies, statewide executive branch agencies, and the legislature in one room to have these conversations about the trends that we're seeing and what a policy that we can provide to the legislature and to the executive branch to ultimately make our roads safer. And so that is our hope today, is to talk about our members and the work that we do, and the policy and procedures that we have developed through our annual report. So I'll pass it back to Carson City, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Julia Peak again for the record, Division of Public and Behavioral Health. As you can see on slide 3, we have a diverse set of members on NVACS. This ranges from some of our traditional partners at the state, local, and tribal governments, and then also our Nevada system of higher education. We also have legislative membership, thank you, and some newer members working in this area, including the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services that joined when NVACS formed. Going to slide 4, the purpose of our NVACS annual report. We wanted to highlight the purpose of the annual report that is developed by our committee. We spend our meetings reviewing data, best practices to address traffic safety, and policies that may positively impact traffic safety in Nevada. We also have established working groups when there are topics that we think need to be more fully researched, and perhaps bring in experts on a specific topic that are not already on NVACS. After this work is done, we do our best to compile and summarize all that information into a report that's given to the governor and the director of the Legislative Council Bureau. We have provided printed copies of this report both in Carson City and Las Vegas, and we also have copies of our presentation. It's also available online at zerofataliesnv.com, and by searching for NVACS, as you scroll down the page, it's under resources. I'm now going to hand it over to Deputy Director Rosenberg to share some data on traffic safety fatalities.
Thank you. For the record, Sondra Rosenberg, Sondra Rosenberg. I'm the Deputy Director over Planning and Administration at NDOT, and have been a member of this committee for quite some time. So I really appreciate the Chair and Vice Chair kicking this off. What you see here is one of the data sets. It's certainly a very important data set that NVACS uses as we have our discussion and develop policy priorities, as well as those working groups, as Ms. Peak mentioned. As you can see, there's a trend. We're not exactly going in the right direction with traffic fatalities, and that speaks to the critically important work of this committee to continue to analyze that. Again, this is just one data set that is used. We have a number of, this is broken down further into a number of different categories, such as pedestrians, motorcycles, passengers, and the analysis continues to go on as we see those trends develop. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew.
Thank you so much. To kind of wrap us out here, the most important, we believe Andrew Bennett for the record, we believe our most important function of NVACS is to fulfill that portion of NRS that allows us to provide the safety priorities that we see fit from the committee. And so we currently have a list of 10 safety priorities. I'm briefly going to walk through these, and we're happy to answer any questions. It's important to know all the data and all of these policy priorities are explained in depth in our annual report. But the 10 priorities that we currently have, which is an ongoing list of policy priorities, the last time we came before the legislature was during the interim, and we received great feedback about the lack of a DUI provision. And so we took that back to our committee and eventually added a DUI policy safety priority. And so the first two are related to automated traffic enforcement. We prefer to call them road safety cameras. This is a proven technology across the world and here at home in the USA. And so we have two specifically. Number one is to advance any automated traffic enforcement in our state. The second one is to focus specifically of automated traffic enforcement in school zones. The third one also relates to school zones, and happy Crossing Guard Appreciation Day as well. It focuses on clearly defining what higher fines in school zones mean. Our fourth one is a primary seatbelt law. We're one of the 15 states that currently still does not have a requirement and a primary reason to pull a car over for a seatbelt violation. Our fifth one is about our young drivers and ensuring that we have the proper process and any additions that we would need to add to continue to make that process as safe as possible. The next one focuses on pedestrian safety. Currently, Nevada is a yield for pedestrian state. We have seen a trend where 10 other states have moved to a stop for pedestrians. And there's a specific bit of nuance that we highlight in our policy recommendation in the annual report. The next one is a traffic records provision that covers ensuring that we receive all of this incredible data from our law enforcement partners and others so that we can make the best decisions and policy recommendations that we can. The next one is our most recent one, which is the Fostering DUI Interventions Program, which covers a great deal of screening for potential DUI offenders to ensure that they're receiving proper treatment. And then the last two is also something that we heard from the interim committee about the need to make sure that we're not just focusing on potential legislative change, but also for things that the traffic safety community, local municipalities, and state government can implement ourselves and not wait necessarily for legislative action. And so the last two is focusing on safe systems at intersections and what we can do as a traffic safety community to increase the safety at those intersections. And then finally is defining what appropriate speed limits for all road users would be. And these are things that we can do today and that we are doing today, but we wanted to make those recommendations as the state committee to all of the jurisdictions across the great state of Nevada. And so that was a very quick overview of our policy priorities. The next slide, we have our contact information. And again, happy to answer any questions about the overall state of traffic safety, our annual report, or any of our traffic safety policy priorities. Thank you so much.
Does that conclude your presentation? Oh, wonderful. Well, I think we have a couple of questions. I will go ahead and start with Senator Pizzina.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really interesting and I enjoyed it. And I also appreciated that it was very quickly given. On the yield to stop as a traffic safety priority, I just wanted to confirm, is that within crosswalks only?
Andrew Bennett for the record. To answer the question, it would be for both painted crosswalks and implied crosswalks. Both are legal places for pedestrians to cross. And so, yes, it would be for both implied and painted crosswalks.
Go ahead, Senator Hansen.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Looking at the stats on the number of fatalities, how do you guys actually measure the actual, because obviously the population from 2015 to 2025, state grew several 100,000. Do you guys measure the number of fatalities based on, million miles traveled, or how do you do it? Because actually, from what I've seen with the computerization of automobiles, so much in it, you've actually seen a decline in the number of at least smaller accidents. So I'm just kind of wondering how you measure overall the, safety level, or however you would define it, of traveling on a Nevada roadway.
Sure. Sandra Rosenberg, Nevada Department of Transportation, for the record. There's a number of different data sets and measures we look at. One of the ones we report to the federal government and in the NDOT performance management report is normalized by population. So I think it's per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So not by population.
100 million miles vehicle?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So it's a
Okay.
rate, but either way, it's a rate based on the miles that's traveled. It is also increasing.
Okay.
And
Well, that's
I
what I
will
thought.
say-
That's what I'm kind of wondering, because when you show that number and you show it by that number, it actually should show a pretty significant declining thing, because the number of million miles traveled in Nevada as the population goes up must be rising as well, I assume. Right
It
on
is
that?
rising as well, but the rate is actually increasing as well. So it's still concerning. And you can find that on page 3 of the report that was attached as documentation for this.
Okay.
this
No, I was just
committee.
kind of wondering how you measure it, because even when you measure it by that standard, when you realize that, 3.3 million people almost in Nevada now, and you had 400 fatalities, and you're measuring it in the hundreds of millions miles traveled,
Right.
we're not doing all that bad. So anyway, thank you.
Any other further questions? Doesn't look like any. I have a couple of questions, if I could go ahead. You had talked about, Chair Bennett, you had talked about how you had some working groups that were maybe specifically, or someone's talked about it, how they were specifically designated to address some of these more like, I guess, controversial or more like in-depth issues that have later become the priority issues. And while my name is on this thing, just to note, I was appointed to it last week, so I wasn't a part of any of those earlier conversations. But can you describe who made up those working groups? Was it just members of this committee, or were there outside groups that were involved in some of these discussions?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. Andrew Bennett for the record. We look forward to you to joining our group, and we appreciate that letter from the Senate leader with your appointment. So we've had 3 working groups that I can recall. The first one focused on the implementation and some of the gaps that might have, or rather there was an NTSB recommendation made by the NTSB to focus on some of the data gaps in our ticketing system that advances to our court system. And so that working group, by statute and by our bylaws, the working groups are able to be attended by anybody, not just members of NVACS. And that citation working group was a prime example of it being open to a wide variety of folks. The second one that's currently ongoing is a equity working group, which is chaired by Amy Davey, who's the director of the State Highway Safety Office. And as well with that group, the list of members is included in the annual report, and you'll see that there's multiple members that aren't members of NVACS. And then finally, there's a policy priority working group, which tries to make the recommendations to the larger group, and that's currently mostly NVACS members, but there is 1 or 2 members that aren't members of NVACS. So the majority of the time with those working groups, there are members outside of NVACS.
I have some follow-up questions on some of the attached documentations regarding the fatalities. I know that, kind of piggybacking off of what Senator Hansen said, it looks like some of these numbers have actually gone down. And I know that in reading some recent reports and some information out of like Clark County, I believe they were talking about how some of this crime and some of these fatalities have gone down. Do you know what they've done in some of these jurisdictions to help curb the traffic fatalities in those areas? Can we phone a friend?
I'm good at Sandra Rosenberg, Nevada Department of Transportation. I don't have that information in front of me at the moment, but each jurisdiction is taking, their own actions as they see fit for their county. Mr. Bennett, I don't know if you want to add to that in terms of the actions that Clark County might be taking.
Thank you for the question, Chair Andrew Bennett for the record. Appearing today specifically as the chair of NVACS, I know that there's a representative of Clark County that's in the room up there, but through that strategic highway safety plan that the state coordinates with the State Office of Traffic Safety and the State Department of Transportation, Lacey Tisler's also, I believe, in the room as the chief traffic safety engineer for NDOT. We are tracking those specific countermeasures that are being implemented across the state of Nevada. And so whether that's suppression of the flashing yellow arrows, increased in pedestrian safety improvements, work on DUIs, those are just a few of the items that across the state that we've seen that have had results. Yes, we've seen promise in certain areas, but there's definitely a need for improvement in certain other areas as well.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to make you speak for any of these other jurisdictions. I was just more curious if, as a part of these like conversations that you had around traffic safety, if you had looked at what the successes were in some of these jurisdictions to see how we can incorporate those or maybe encourage people to do this on a statewide level. I see lots of people from NVACS shaking their head that are in the audience, but I appreciate that answer. We have a couple other questions, I believe, from Senator Daniate.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation. I'm wearing my public health hat because obviously there's always a conversation of injury prevention, and so I'm still learning. So I apologize if some of my questions are like pretty easy to answer or redundant. But number one is I know in your priorities you mentioned traffic speed limits and probably reconsidering that. So more so for my understanding, I'm assuming that speed limits are in NRS, and can you provide context in terms of the flexibility that local jurisdictions have to set speed limits? And then the reason why I'm asking that is because I'm wondering if there's a conversation needed to be had about lowering speed limits in certain urban areas. Obviously, school zones are one of the most prevalent complaints. And the reason why I was asking that is, if I remember some of my public health classes, there are other city jurisdictions that do random numbers like 23 or 24 instead of 25 as an incentive, right, to capture the attention of the driver. And so I guess that's the reason of why I'm asking the question in terms of what's the flexibility that local jurisdictions have, and should we consider modifying them for the urban areas?
I'll start. Sandra Rosenberg, NDOT Deputy Director. The speed limit policy is prescribed in NRS, but it's typically given to the jurisdiction that owns the roadway. So, for example, NDOT has the responsibility to set speed limits on the roadways that we own. We typically follow, best practices in terms of looking at a study in terms of what is the current speed, what is the design speed, how is the road designed, and how are people actually using the road, and adjust the speed limit accordingly in what we consider a safe manner. We're also adjusting that to also look at if we go out there and do a speed study and we see that typically you'll hear referenced a lot the 85th percentile speed. If we see that that is exceeding the current speed limit, we have a couple of options. We could keep it as is. We could lower it. If we lower it, we're finding that people are already not obeying it, so that may or may not have an effect. But really looking at, are there improvements we can do to the design of the roadway to encourage a slower speed? We have limited resources, so we can't do that everywhere, but typically when we are asked to look at a speed study, we look at the roadway features, how it's currently operated, what it was designed at, and what improvements can we do to make it a safer facility. And so similarly, most of the local jurisdictions will do something similar to adjust their speed limit, but it is up to the local jurisdiction to set those numbers.
Senator, if I may, briefly.
Go
Andrew
ahead.
Bennett thank you, Chair. Andrew Bennett for the record. On slide 6, there's two colors. There's the kind of teal color, and then there's the orange color. The orange color are the items that we can implement ourselves currently without legislative change. And then as well, to the second part of the question from the senator is school zones are set by state law, 15 miles an hour in front of a school and 25 miles an hour in a defined crossing zone.
Thank you. And Chair, if I may follow up. So that leads to my next question. So obviously in public health, we always talk about enforcement, environment, and education. And so one of the issues that I know has been persistent in my district is drag racing and speed racing. I know it wasn't mentioned as a part of your policy priorities, but is there anything that us as a state legislature can look at to implement to at least stop the prevalence of what's occurring, at least in the urban setting?
Sandra Rosenberg, and that's a difficult question for me to answer. I think that question is best directed towards law enforcement agencies. We're happy to take that back to the committee and have that discussion, but I'm just not in a position to make a recommendation on that at this time.
Juliet Peak, for the record, I'll just say I had the opportunity, I too ask questions like you're asking because I have very little experience in traffic safety myself. So these are often the discussions that they explain to me and let me go with them to see how this works. So related to speed, I just wanted to note one thing, and then also with drag racing. So with the speed, I had the opportunity to go to a town hall meeting in Mound House related to the speeding there and the pedestrian fatalities. And we heard from the community, and we talked about environment. We talked about speeding. There's a great graphic that I'll ask my NDOT partners to provide to you after that shows if you reduce the speed even by 5 miles per hour, the survivability of the people involved in that crash goes up. And so part of it is just educating folks that really 5 miles per hour could save somebody's life. We also discussed at that meeting a number of things where you could change the environment to make it safe, and hearing what their recommendations were. It was really a great opportunity. And I'll note one of the things that NDOT is able to do is help us quantify that information. So some of the criticism about reducing speed was my commute would be longer from Dayton to Carson. We have a number of people that commute. It was minimal, a couple minutes, and then the survivability rate of that accident goes up so much. Related to then the citation working group that I had the pleasure to serve on as well, one of the things I was curious about is the high-risk folks, right? The people who are drag racing are the ones that are very high risk. Their behavior shows that they have a level of invincibility and they're doing things that are really, really dangerous. So we were trying to understand through that how many citations occur with the speed limit excessively high, hours, et cetera. So we tried to dig into the data for all those things, but it is really looking at the data and then figuring out how do we get behavior change in this very high-risk population. That's very difficult. They're not the ones potentially who are gonna change behavior based on a citation. So very interesting. We're looking at that and trying to find opportunities to intervene, but behavior change is truly one of the hardest things to change.
Do we have any further questions? I'm sure we will see you back here throughout the session. Part of the reason I selected some of the organizations to present is I know that I anticipate seeing a bunch of bills that were on your priority list. So thank you so much. And we will move on to our next presentation. And if I can invite the Department of Motor Vehicles up to give their presentation, that would be wonderful. And I think we have two, right? Yes. Let's make sure we get that PowerPoint up.
Good afternoon, Chair, Committee. For the record, Angela Smith-Lamb, Deputy Director, DMV.
Can I get you to move in a little bit closer to that microphone? And it's not the best acoustics in here, so.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
For the record, Angela Smith-Lamb, Deputy Director, DMV. Joining me today at the table is Sean Sever. He's our Deputy Administrator of Research Project Management and also our designated legislative liaison, and often will help with any of your needs. If you guys need help, he's a great point of contact to reach out to. He can get you in touch with whoever might be able to answer your questions. So without further ado, I would like to start by saying Director Laney extends her apologies for not being able to be here due to unforeseen circumstances. She's not able to attend in person. So DMV exists and operates under NRS 481. DMV remains focused on our vision and mission to move most services online while maintaining emphasis on premier customer service in a secure environment. DMV is comprised of 7 divisions supported by the Director's Office. There are 1,292 authorized positions and 18 field offices statewide, 2 of which primarily focus on commercial services. Thanks in large part to the raises provided last session, we have seen our lowest vacancy rates at around just 5%. DMV continues to partner with county assessors and AAA offices for vehicle registration transactions. In addition, there are more than 50 partner kiosks statewide that are not shown on this slide but can be found on our website. The department completes roughly 8 million transactions annually, which is an average of 28,000 transactions each business day. Appointments are required in our DMV Metro offices for most services. We also have rolled out a hybrid walk-in and appointment model in most of our rural offices. DMV's strategic goals are identified in this slide and help to direct our decisions over the next several fiscal years. The DMV's transformation effort will help us to achieve many of these goals. This slide displays DMV's executive leadership team, who are a dedicated team of experienced professionals that hold steadfast to promoting DMV's mission to better serve and improve operations for DMV staff and our fellow Nevadans. And a special shout out to our dedicated DMV team members that come to work for DMV knowing DMV is not the favorite among state agency, but so many of them show up each day to give their best and are truly dedicated to providing the best customer service to their neighbors and the communities they live in. DMV is primarily funded with highway funds, fees, cost allocations, and commissions from fees collected by the department. While DMV receives general funds for automatic voter registration, it's a very small amount of our funding. DMV is subject to a cap on the amount of highway fund appropriations it can receive for operations. The cap has been 22% in the past, but has been and is currently set at 27% to account for our transformation effort. The cap is set to return to 22% in FY26. With the continuation of our project efforts, we anticipate needing to continue the extension of the cap, and DMV is currently working with GFO to submit a BDR. In FY24, DMV collected approximately $1.8 billion. The $1.8 billion collected by the department is divvied up as reflected on this slide, with a significant portion of the funds collected going to the counties, school district, and the highway fund. DMV receives a portion of the fees for operational expenses at around 6%. These charts illustrate DMV's funding sources for operations. As previously identified, 46.58% of DMV's funding comes from highway funds, but more than half of DMV's funding at 53% comes from other revenue sources such as fees and commissions. The DMV priorities for the next biennium can be organized into 4 major categories, which include continuation of our modernization efforts, ensuring operations continue to run smoothly, addressing growing resource challenges and operational issues, and reorganization to align staffing with modernization efforts. The DMV's top priority remains our transformation effort, with a heavy focus to move most DMV services online. DMV recognized the need to increase the processing efficiency of customer transactions to meet the demands resulting from increased population and a demand for improved services. This multi-year complete transformation pertains to work processes and systems currently utilized to handle department transactions. This program intends to modernize legacy systems, thereby improving the efficiency and effectiveness of DMV operations, enhance customer service, increase the department's online presence, making it easier for customers to conduct business with DMV. This does not mean our fellow Nevadans will not be allowed to come to brick and mortar offices. It will just offer more choice and convenience for the services we provide and assist with the growing demand on our resources. DMV has published the DMV roadmap on our website of all core DMV services and products that we are working towards transforming. Our primary focus for the next biennium is to continue to develop and improve vehicle programs and services, completing core vehicle products by the end of the biennium and beginning designing of credentials. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sean Sever.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Sean Sever from the Nevada DMV. We have had tremendous success, and the public has benefited greatly from the rollout of our services that were previously major pain points at the DMV, such as the ability for customers to submit online complaints regarding violations in vehicle sales, concerns with mechanic garages, emission stations and driving schools, and reporting identity theft. We also modernized our appointment system, allowing for the ease of use and reminder notifications, with the ability for customers to cancel appointments, freeing up appointments for other Nevadans. We also added the ability for Nevadans to submit documents electronically for out-of-state and first-time registrations. We also made improvements for commercial businesses to process titles through partnerships. We also rolled out a pilot program to allow electronic submission of titles for individuals. And we modernized our contact center, allowing better management of communication channels and more efficient service for customer chat, telephone, and email inquiries. And we will soon be converting some old manual invoice processes for businesses to electronic billing. As a result of these new services, we have saved many Nevadans from having to visit a DMV office and freeing up capacity in our offices and giving Nevadans more of their precious time back. I want to talk about some of the bills from last session. So I wanted to thank everyone that worked with us on delaying the implementation of your bills, and including the language when the DMV determines sufficient resources are in place for implementation. That gave us great flexibility, and once again, this session, we're going to be working out of 2 IT systems. But I'm happy to report that we have now implemented all but one, I'm going to say 1.5 bills from last session. So AB 161, which was a medical indicator on the driver's license. We have added that to driver's license, but not yet to the registrations. And then also AB 203, which is personalized military license plates, and that should be completed in April. And so this session, we have 4 bills. The first one is SB 22. That is a motor carrier bill. It's we're going to submit an amendment that's going to change the whole bill, but basically, when fuel tax returns are due, the statute says monthly. We want to change that to the end of the month, so there's a specific date when they're due. So this will make things clearer for the DMV, for our customers. SB 80 is for our Compliance Enforcement Division. It would clarify existing statutes and activities that they're already doing to address stolen vehicles, unlicensed motor vehicle industry involvement in the trafficking of stolen vehicles, and emissions system tampering. And then AB 20 is a housekeeping bill that covers 2 things. It would amend NRS 485 to give the DMV mailing flexibility to use electronic notifications. And then number 2, it revises provisions passed in SB 66 from the last session to clarify that the DMV continue to print medical condition codes on the back of driver's licenses, along with the new medical symbol on the front. And then we also have a budget BDR, which would increase the fee for diesel and gasoline emission certificates from $6 to $7, which is needed due to increased expenditures in the pollution control budget and a gradual decrease of gasoline and diesel-fueled vehicles on the road. So AB 349 of the 81st session also increased the time period when new vehicles are not required to have smog checks, which is also to decrease the growth of this revenue source. And then last but not least, we are working on launching a new website very soon. We have spent a tremendous amount of time building it, making things easier for customers and organizing major categories of doing business with the DMV into different sections so people can find things easier. We will be launching this soon, and the website will also feature our new brand, which is DMV Wherever. You may have seen this already on social media and billboards around the state. It features outdoor scenes of Nevada with people completing their DMV transactions on their mobile device at a campsite, a beach at Lake Tahoe, or while hiking in Red Rock. The idea is to show off some of the beautiful areas of our state while asking people if they would rather be standing in line at the DMV or in some of these beautiful places. And this can, of course, be accomplished in the same way from someone's living room. So that concludes our presentation, and we can answer any questions at this point.
I think we have a couple questions here. I think I have an easy one. Are there plans to expand the kiosks that are available, and have they been relatively successful? Although I do know that I sat online for a kiosk and then the whole system went down, but I'm hoping that doesn't happen all the time.
For the record, Angela Smith-Lamb, I'm glad you find them valuable. They're up most of the time. We do have outages every now and again and try to address them quickly. The way that it works is with our partner vendor, we will get a request for additional kiosks, and our partner will assess the area that the request was made for to determine whether or not there's enough foot traffic to be profitable for them to place that hardware in, because they have to send someone out to maintenance and take care of the machines. So I think we had a recent request for a kiosk on the UNLV campus. That's the most recent one I'm aware of.
How do people go about making those requests for a kiosk? I mean, it seems like a natural thing to have a kiosk at the university, and I'm kind of surprised there wasn't one there already, but go ahead.
So the kiosks require 1,000 transactions a month. So if they don't hit 1,000, they bill the agency or the company back where it's located. So it doesn't really work in small communities much. Sean Sever from the DMV for the record, sorry. But yeah, in larger cities, definitely, so.
And I have just one last kind of very specific question. I've had some constituents reach out to me around some of these third-party vendors that charge fees, go wait in the line, get your registered vehicle, get your sticker, and are able to provide those kind of services. And I know for a while, can you kind of give some history on what that was? I know there were quite a few of these companies that maybe had been grandfathered into some priority lines, and there were other people that were trying to get into it. And what have you done to try to make that more equitable?
Sean Sever from the DMV. Yes, we had a town hall with all of the registration service companies last year. The issue is we have a couple windows in each DMV office that service all these companies. There are thousands of these companies. And so it's the same problem we have with our customers, is too many people trying to fit into the DMV. So we just recently instituted we put them into an appointment system, which has worked wonderfully for us. The companies can get 2 appointments at a time, so once they use 1 appointment, they can go get another one. And so, but the issue is just too many companies for too little windows.
If I might, Chair. For the record, Angela Smith Lamb, in regards to your question around grandfathering in appointments, for the registration services that had longstanding agreements with the department, we did grandfather them in to allow them to retain a certain number of appointments several days a week in our offices. And so the newer folks that have these reg services and business licenses are the ones that are benefiting from the appointment system that Sean referred to.
And just to kind of follow up with that, I recently received like a picture from a constituent that had, it was a picture, it was like a sticker that had been placed on kiosks. And it said something about how it was unlawful for third-party vendors who accept a fee to use those kiosks. Is that authority in statute? Because it doesn't, I'm looking at the sticker, it just is a warning label, like sticker that's on the kiosk, but it doesn't have any citation to an NRS. And I was wondering if there's, what authority, statutory authority is for that.
For the record, Angela Smith, DMV, that is not something I'm aware of, so if you could share that with us, Chair Nguyen, we'll take a look at that. As far as I know, we don't have any restrictions for the reg services to use those kiosks.
I will go ahead and provide that to you. It looks like a very formal sticker. It says, "It is unlawful for vendors, third parties to charge for conduct kiosk transactions on behalf of others," and it's also in Spanish. So I'll go ahead and provide that to you because it sounds like it's an official sticker that looks like it's been placed on these kiosks. So thank you. And I think Senator Doñate has some questions.
Thank you, Chair. More so of a comment. I just want to think about the modernization efforts that you have made. I just recently renewed my ID, but I do have a complaint. I want the old design back. So I don't know if there's anything you guys can do about that. That's about it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Pizzina?
Thank you so much. I remember last session, we had the opportunity to chat about a potential new office opening on Blue Diamond and kind of the southwest portion of the Las Vegas Valley, and then potentially the Henderson location closing. I didn't know if there might be an update on that.
For the record, Angela Smith, DMV. I'm not aware of a Blue Diamond location. Obviously, when we go into the new Silverado Ranch area, our intention is to close the location that we're at, but we are exploring options in partnership with Buildings and Grounds, our leasing services, to find a space to retain at least 6 staff to serve the community in that area for driver license services. And we did partner with AAA to open 2 locations in that community to do registration services.
Thank you so much. So I must have misunderstood when we talked about opening one in the Southwest Valley. Nothing has been determined yet. That's still in the air, along with the potential closing then of the Stephanie location in Henderson.
For the record, Angela Smith. So the location that's Henderson and Donovan now will be moving to Silverado Ranch and off of Valley View. And so we will no longer have the location as it exists today in Henderson. And unfortunately, for additional locations, because of our cap, we have to be very thoughtful about the type of space and how we expand.
Thank you. So I guess it was Silverado Ranch and not Blue Diamond. When is that scheduled to take place?
For the record, Angela Smith. So we're looking at opening the new facility. It's moving along very quickly. They're actually going to be doing a topping ceremony for that structure at the end of this month. And they're looking at having substantial completion by May 2026.
Thank you so much. And I just had one other question. And I was curious if you know the statistic. How many Nevadans right now still need to get a real ID ahead of the May deadline?
Sean Sever from the DMV. We are higher percentage complete in Nevada than most other states, so we're in the high 70%. But some people don't need them. If you have a passport, you'll still be able to travel. But yeah, the deadline is May 7th of this year. So I can get back to you on how many people still need it.
Senator Hansen, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Actually, I always kind of feel sorry for DMV. You know, when Musk gave an example of the worst possible thing that people could relate to in government, he said, you ever been to the DMV? The federal government's like the DMV on scale. That was his comment, as I recall. So, you guys, just, you know, compliment, first of all. I think going back to Kirkland when he was director of DMV, so that's back in Gibbons' time, it's dramatically improved. You guys are doing a much better job. I mean, people, the overall level of satisfaction, in spite of the huge spike in number of people doing it. So overall, everything looks good. I noticed, though, on your BDR list, one thing I think Sean, you and I have talked about, the idea of giving a 2 or 3 year registration window instead of just a 1 year. I know we did it with HOVs, and it was very popular, and it gives you a lot of money up front and reduces the cost for consumers. Have you guys considered that at all for just regular automobiles or any other, you know, trucks, whatever?
Sean Sever from the DMV. We haven't considered that, but it's not a bad idea.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you said that, since I just suggested it. You're getting to be a really smart lobbyist, you know?
Angela Smith, for the record.
I'm an idiot senator would think of an idea like that, you know?
I just want to follow that too. We do have 3-year registration option for trailers as
Yeah.
it stands now, but
Right.
not for regular passenger vehicles.
Okay, well, something you might consider, you know, a lot of, now especially smog issues have gone way down, now that they have everything computerized on automobiles. A number of people in Nevada, do you have any idea how many, because auto insurance rates have gone through the roof. I mean, everybody's complaining about it. And as the cost goes up, I assume the number of people, especially on the lower end of the economic spectrum, are having a greater and greater struggle affording it, even though it's required by law. Do you have any idea what percentage of motor vehicles on the road, or motor vehicle drivers on the road are uninsured?
Sean Sever from the DMV. I got a request from your office a few minutes ago, and we're working on that. So I'll get back to you.
Well, good. Bo, if you're listening, thank you very much. You're on top of it. Well, yeah, I would like to find out, because that is a big issue. And last question, almost all vehicles go through you guys except boats. Is there some reason boats don't? I mean, it'd be kind of easier if we can just get everything in one location. Is there any other, besides boats, is there anything else that get registered out by any other agency in the state? I think it's kind of a weird carve-out, but I've always kind of wondered why.
For the record, Angela Smith, I'll do my best to respond, but my understanding is boats have traditionally gone through Department of Wildlife, and that funding source ends up going back into conservation for lakes and waterways. And I'm not aware of any other vehicle other than maybe planes. We don't do any registration for that.
Okay, we came with another one, so there are some. Anyway, you guys doing a great job. Thank you. You've been exceptionally responsive to all of our needs, even the one we just made. So from a senator perspective, it's been really nice working with you guys. And Miss Julie Butler, but hopefully the new, I don't know if I've met Tanya Laney yet, but we'll have to have a visit at some point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do we have any further questions? Senator Brock, do you have any? Thank you. Just one follow-up question. You had mentioned that your vacancy rates, what are your current vacancy rates? Sorry, I'm not on the, I'm gonna ask it again because I wasn't on the mic. What are your current vacancy rates?
For the record, Angela Smith, it's around 5%. So the last number that I had, we have 1,292 FTEs and around 65, very low. It's been amazing.
That when we instituted some of those significant state worker raises last cycle, I think you guys were at the highest vacancy rate around like, I think you were close to 40%. Is that correct?
For the record, Angela Smith, I don't recall if we got that high. I know it was on average, at least hovering around 20%.
20%?
Yeah.
So with these increased raises that we were able to provide during the last legislative session, were you able to recruit and obtain more people to work at the DMV?
For the record, yes, Chair. It's done wonders for us to be able to recruit, and we recognize that the DMV, especially for the Nevadans, that the people we hire are the biggest assets that we have. So we make a priority of going out and recruiting staff, and those raises have made a huge difference. So thank you again. Thank you to this body and the governor.
Thank you. I don't think we have any further questions. Oh, you have, I think you got an answer for Senator Hansen. Is that what happened?
Did.
Yeah, that's service. Go ahead.
It's actually for you, Chair. Sean Sever from the DMV. The stickers at the grocery store were actually from the grocery store itself. Grocery stores were charging a fee for customers to use it inside their services, inside their stores. So it's not Reg Services.
If I might, I want
Can you state your name for the record?
For the record, Angela Smith, we were made aware of some issues with some kiosks in some locations, and we find out that stuff. We work with our vendor partner to have those kiosks removed because they don't serve the purpose for the community, and they get into a war using some of those kiosks. So we have run into some challenges with those.
So just to be clear, that sticker that was placed on there was not placed on it by the DMV. That was a rogue sticker, for lack of a better term.
For the record, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Pretty clever by whoever the competitor is to make it look official like that, huh?
Well, thank you for your presentation, and that brings us to our last presentation, the Nevada Department of Transportation. I think we have Director Larkin Thomason here, so I will. And go ahead and begin when you are ready.
I'm definitely going to have to use my outside voice. Tracy Larkin Thomason, TracyLarkin, I'm glad I ended at the only two last names. Director for the Nevada Department of Transportation. To my left is Joe Harrington, he's the head of communications for NDOT, and to my right is Sandra Rosenberg, who's the Deputy Director for Planning and Administration for us. And since we just ended with the information on vacancy rates, I thought I'd start off on that one. We started at 26% vacancy rates with the pay raises, and thank you very much. We are down to 14.7%. We still struggle with engineers in many places around the state, but particularly in the rural areas, it has been extremely helpful. I was really about a year ago, I was down like in the Austin area, 7 out of 7 positions at the maintenance station. We're now back up to 4 and growing, and a lot of them are coming back. And that is, of course, great for the state because we need them around there, taking care of the remote areas. There are still stretches of highways that must be covered. So again, thank you. So the road to success is always under construction by Lily Tomlin, and it's just a very, very true part. As one of the fastest growing states in the nation, I believe I keep getting different answers between 4 and 5, but still we're definitely up there. And it really accentuates the transportation needs on there. noting that one of my favorite sayings when I'm talking to groups is that please understand that as soon as you open your front door, you're using transportation. Sidewalks, buses, trails, cars, etc. So the next one, paving the way since 1917. We maintain 5,400 center lane miles of highway, more than 1,200 bridges. We have 1,900 employees, and our budget is approximately $1 billion a year. When I say approximately, that also depends on grants, and it'll fluctuate between about 800 million to about 1,200 million, so we're right in there. I just mentioned the vacancy rate, so I also want to call upon Nevada's core functions, because we're not just bridges and roads. We really do, we do have the preservation, bridges and pipes and et cetera. Also, betterment and road operations, so we have all the district plowing, the services we provide, such as Freeway Service Patrol, which is on I-95 and I-80 in southern Nevada, and on 395 and I-15 and I-95 in southern Nevada, I-80 and 395 in northern Nevada. We are going to talk a little bit more about some of the impacts to the systems. We are doing some less projects. We are down about 66% in our preservation projects, and our betterment projects, which are like chip seals and slurry seals in the rural areas, are down about 50%. On the financial outlook, NDOT, we are highly reliant on state and federal fuel tax. These revenues were established in 1993. The state tax is 18.455 cents per gallon, and the federal tax is 18.4 cents per gallon. I also want to state that these are flat, so if you pay $1 per gallon of gas or you pay $5 per gallon of gas, we get the same amount of tax from each gallon. Obviously, I know you're familiar with some other fuel revenue indexing systems with the RTCs in both southern Nevada and northern Nevada. In southern Nevada, we do receive as part of it some fuel revenue indexing from the state portion of the tax. So, and that is, it's not a huge amount, but it's definitely enough to count. It's about $40 million a year. So it's not an interchange anymore, but it's a good sized project. Some of the factors contributing to the cost increases, really, the biggest ones are material ones. We've talked about the cost of so I'm getting off my notes and my slides. I apologize for that. So one of the things that we're really looking at there is we have the asphalt, concrete, steel, and labor have all gone up significantly. And we also followed, like I said, 68%, and that's over from the last quarter in 2021 up to recent times. The prices have stabilized some. We will be looking at some of the impacts and the upcoming things as some of the tariffs and supply chain things hit us. We also made sure that we said those were the national trends, and those came from looking across the entire nation. We tracked it specifically in Nevada, and we were right in there with that. We did 58 projects the previous year, and it was with 58% inflation costs over the 2 years. Some of the program impacts, what used to be items that were just ancillary to our projects, and I want to say like homeless, trash abatements, and in the right-of-way, and also copper theft, is now approximately $30 million a year around the state. So that's a significant hit of things that we just need to take care of. It's basically part of doing business. As I said, replacement and repair. There's a lot of theft, tunnel lights, street lights, the box culverts. Also, we do a lot more for environmental and stormwater permitting and mitigation. And then again, the skilled labor shortages, which I mentioned before. Also going to mention, and we'll mention it a little bit coming in, one of the impacts is the new executive order that came. It has provided some uncertainty in the flow of federal funds. And I don't want to say they're stopping, but with the formula funds are fine. We're moving forward with the projects on there. But the federal funds, including, and that would be a lot of the grants that also came through, are being reviewed. And even if we're feeling relatively confident about getting those funds, and we're relatively confident in the ones that were well-established, so like Tropicana in Southern Nevada and a couple of the other ones, if it hadn't been obligated or it's fairly new, we're not completely sure, and we're also not sure of the timing. And any federal fund is a reimbursement program. We expend state dollars first, then submit an invoice and get reimbursed. So when I'm unsure of the timing, so that is a major impact to the projects that we're putting out now, because I want to make sure that we're managing the state dollars that are there so that we can pay for them and cover those costs until such time we get reimbursed. So that's definitely a concern. So in the 2024 to 2033, this is reflective of the 10-year transportation needs. We have a need of about 1.5 billion to a little over $2 billion a year. And in the 10 years, just simply by multiplying, that's 15.9 billion to $20 billion. I want to also state that those dollars were, these were updated in January. It looks a little bit less. Some previous presentation showed a higher amount, but there have been a few projects that have been deleted or removed from the, canceled or removed from the program. For the 10-year transportation needs, there, we did assume a 4% inflation rate was assumed, and which is, you know, and I actually asked the question a few times on that assumption because it had been so high in the last couple of years. But we were looking ahead, and that seemed to be the appropriate one to put forward at this time. We'll be watching that closely. But with that being said, we are looking at basically each year being behind about $500 million of projects, just regular needs putting out. Thank you.
Thank you. I know we have a couple of questions. I guess I will go ahead and get it started. You had talked about the rising costs of construction costs, and in fact, a lot of times we talk about these projects and their estimates have doubled, tripled, and even quadrupled since the initial funding was sought. Does NDOT come up with any kind of strategic plan to deal with some of these rising costs of construction moving forward? And when you're coming to the legislative bodies or when you're putting forth these like federal matching grants to say, you know, we think it's going to cost $500 million right now, but it might cost $1.5 billion by the time we actually start the project.
Tracy Larkin Thomas and NDOT for the record. We try to be extremely, well, the last 2 years were a fluctuation. I will say there was the year, particularly 2023, when it was even local construction firms were hearing that they were having trouble figuring out what the cost of literally, you know, a board was one day as opposed to when they actually went to buy it. So yes, we are looking ahead. We're paying very close attention to the markets. And we are factoring in, we always factor in what today's dollars are, and then, as you said, the inflation. We'll be watching very closely, again, the effects of any tariffs coming in, the supply chain, you know, particularly anything with steel, anything with metal in. We've always had a delay with things for like light poles, things like that. And now we're expecting it could be much greater. So we also have to factor in when we have the project of, is there things that we can get ahead of time or take care of ahead of time so that when we actually get to when the project going out, it's more stable and it's not impacting the actual construction phasing.
You kind of answered my question there. I was reading about how 49% of steel is imported, mostly from Canada and Mexico, and a little bit from Brazil. So I was wondering if some of those potential like tariffs, particularly with Canada and the steel that we need for these projects, if that's been something that we've started to incorporate in the increasing costs of some of these projects moving forward.
Well, steel and also chips, because we do a lot of TSMO features, transportation system management and operations. Those are like your ramp meters. Those are those big dynamic message signs you see that tell you like how far to the next interchange or variable speed limits, all those things that we actually use to kind of manage the operations, particularly in the urban areas and also in the outlying areas and communication, is how do we actually, most of those come from China and some other places. So again, we're managing, as we're moving into a digital age, more and more, it's all these factors are hitting us.
That kind of brings me to some questions about some existing projects that are going. Obviously, I think people in Southern Nevada are very familiar with the Tropicana I-15 project.
Yes.
Can you give an update on whether or not that's progressing? I know that was a significant infrastructure. I think it was about 60% federally funded. Is that on track to be completed soon? Where are we at on that one?
Like, oh God, yes. But Tracy Larkin Thomason, NDOT for the record, yes, it is on target. It should be substantially complete by the August, and it should be completed by September. There's some additional work that between August and September that is west of the interchange that was an added to the project.
And then up north, I know at the 395 North Valley widening, can you give an update on whether or not that is projecting and progressing in the same manner?
Yes, the Phase 1B, which is currently up there, it is scheduled to be completed next year on there. There is a Phase 2 that is going out. This one we're watching very closely because it has a very large grant in it. It's about, I'm sorry, I'm going to make sure I can put.
I think it's 87.
Yeah, 87 or 89 million dollars in it, and it has the timing feature. It will be advertising this summer, in the midsummer, late summer, but we will probably pause the notice to proceed the construction for another year while we monitor very closely on what the grant situation is.
What does that mean for that project in particular if we don't receive that and we can't enter into phase 2 because we don't have that additional $89 million?
Tracy Larkin Thomason, NDOT for the record, it means that something, if we go forward with funding that project, because it's a significant amount. It's a couple $100 million for that project. It means something else will be delayed, that will be delayed, or something else will have to be moved.
And I know up here, anyone that's traveled on this road understands the impacts of the potential widening of the I-80. I think it's projected to be about a 500 to 600 million project now, as of today. And there are about 275 million, I think, that was in federal funding.
Yes,
Is that another project that's currently in a pause as we see whether or not those funds will
Tracy
ultimately
Larkin
be available?
Thomason, NDOT for the record. It is moving forward right now, and I want to say cautiously moving forward. We did get the grant, while the grant was fairly recent, and it's, as you stated, $275,520,000. I learned that number. While we're looking at, and that's a huge need. On that one, we are preparing, we had $6.5 million. We're looking now preparing the augmentations that we need to actually manage the project and no matter how it's delivered. And then we're looking at approximately a year of geotechnical work. Most people who are familiar, that are probably familiar, that's kind of a cliff. You have two, your eastbound and westbound are at different levels. You then go down a cliff, you hit a railroad, you hit a river. We also have some Court of Antiquities areas in there that must be avoided. So as we're like between Vista and Mustang, we will be widening completely to the north. There is no room to widen to the south. And that's also would be a sizable, that stretch is particularly impactful to get it done. So as we look forward, we may end up having to do a smaller phases at a time, phase it out, and which might take a little longer, like I said, from Vista to, maybe it's the Lockwood interchanges first, and then it's Vista to Mustang. So we'll be looking very closely at how the cash flow will be and how to fund that project.
Thank you. Senator Hansen, do you have any questions?
First of all, compliment whoever runs your North Fork Maintenance Station up in northern Elko. You know, my ranch is up there. I spend a lot of time up there in the winter when I'm not here, obviously. They've done a marvelous job keeping the roads open and really done a great job. Now, a less pleasant topic, though, in my district also is the fiber optic cable situation, which is contract through you guys. There's 34 miles supposed to be done, 2 miles got done. You guys, I don't know if you're on the hook or the AG is, but one way or another, the contractor there was paid $9 million. The job hasn't been done out of a $13 million contract. Big lawsuit involved. The subcontractor has not been paid. Anyway, it's in my district. I'm very heavily involved. Actually filed the criminal complaint to try to catch the contractor that got away with the $9 million. Are you allowed to talk about any of that? Because obviously the whole
Tracy?
fiber optics thing is sitting, and all my people over there that could use that, once it's installed, are obviously delayed, plus the loss of the $9 million is quite concerning to me.
Tracy Larkin Thomason, NDOT for the record, and no, sir, I cannot comment on it. It is in litigation. I can refer you to the state AG's office.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured, honestly. So when I get my chance to talk to the AG in the Judiciary Committee, Aaron, be prepared. One other question, FOI, Freedom of Information Act requests that have been given to your agency. Bunch of complaints about how your agency stonewalls and refuses to give documents that are clearly, because we know that you had them because other people had received them, but your agency is not providing them in a reasonable time frame. So I just want to, that's something that's a sensitive issue, because that's something that all government agencies are supposed to comply with, even when sometimes the documents may not leave the agency in the best light. But I have a serious complaint on that from some people involved in that situation. So I just want to get that on the record.
Okay, Tracy Larkin Thomason, NDOT for the record. We do try to get them out in as reasonable time as possible. And whether it's favorable to us or not, the documents are what they are. Obviously, some of them, some cases, they are personal things and they have to be reviewed if there's anything in it that needs to be redacted. And I was just looking at a report earlier on there. We get several thousand, and I mean tens of thousands of record requests. And they take a large amount of time, and they're taking about 35% of the staff time in that area to respond. They also cost, and that costs money. So we're looking at how we can recoup, but also stretch the resources that are in there to actually get to them in a reasonable amount of time. And many times the requests that come in are for such large amounts. It's like we want everything from 2022 to 2025 that mentions this. And sometimes the first part will be go back, can you like narrow specifically what you're looking for? And sometimes it's like everything, and then usually after a couple of just back and forths, and it's usually quickly done on through emails, it's just, can you give us like, what are you really looking for, that we can get it to you much more quickly? And then that's balanced with the other ones that are with them.
Well, we're aware that some of the requests are ridiculous, and we're trying to, I think, in the legislature, we'll probably deal with that at some point this session. But these came from attorneys who I'm pretty sure were following very reasonable requests, so I don't think they were that unreasonable. And, frankly, the Gary Schmidt's of the world, I know him well, and he was the one that makes some crazy requests, and that's one everybody uses all the time as a horrible example. But in this case, I don't think that's the case. So anyway, when you have redactions in that, is that done through your attorney, through your deputy attorney general?
Tracy Larkin Thomason, NDOT for the record, and yes, it is.
Okay, so that's who I need to talk to again. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Attorney General Ford, hopefully he's put on notice now. You have lots of questions for him. Do we have any other further questions from the committee? I do have one more question, and it's kind of bringing back to something Senator Hansen actually brought up when we were listening to some of the presentations from the RTC and Campo, I think in particular. Senator Hansen had asked about some of the roadways and filling potholes and how there was an initiative to fix some of these roads. And I think he said flippantly, well, when it gets really bad, then they'll vote for the tax to fix their roads. Can you talk to me a little bit about, does it in fact become more expensive the longer we let some of these roadways deteriorate?
Tracy Larkin Thomason, NDOT for the record, absolutely. Typically, it becomes anywhere from 6 to 10 times more, depending on the type of roadway it is. Since I don't have the graph with me, it's flat like this, and then all of a sudden, when it hits this point, let's say a mill and fill, a road, a typical asphalt road, usually we'd go back about every 8 years and resurf it, which means when I say mill and fill, you take off about 2 inches and put the 2 inches back. So basically, you're always updating the wearing surface. Once that wearing surface deteriorates, it is a very sharp down, because very sharp angle down. So, and the sound effects are great, aren't they? But
I like it.
but when that happens, it's the cost of actually going in, because now you're not just doing the wearing surface, you're getting down to, you might get down to the subgrade. So in some areas, when you start getting extreme alligator cracking, they actually kind of comes into cobbles. And the same thing with potholes. You know, if a pothole, you can repair it so much, we do try to go in and hit the potholes with grind it down, and so that it's a longer patch. So it's not just smaller ones that pop up. And also particularly here in northern Nevada with the freeze-thaw cycle on there. So if we can maintain the wearing surface, then it becomes like a bunch of little ones. It's not a very deep dive.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your presentation, and thank you for being patient with all of our questions today, especially mine. And with that, you guys can step back unless you have anything further you'd like to say. And that brings us to our last agenda item, which is public comment. Again, just for those calling in, it is 1-888-475-4499. The meeting ID for this meeting today is 862-6496-3531, and press pound and wait for our AVH staff to introduce you when it is your turn. I will open up the table here in Carson City as well as in Las Vegas. Please fill in the seats and begin when you're ready. Remind everyone to state your name and please limit your testimony to 2 minutes. Go ahead and begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Miranda Hoover with 3C House, representing the Registered Services Association of Nevada. We do have quite a few of our members watching this committee today. And actually just a few minutes ago, I had a photo sent to me from the DMV down in Las Vegas on Decatur that does have a kiosk sticker directly on it. We also have confirmation that there are these kiosk stickers both at the Henderson and a few other locations as well, including the Rayleighs and Sparks, and also the Rayleighs on Mount Rose Highway on the DMV kiosk. So I just wanted to put that on the record. So our association, of course, and our members are looking for additional guidance from the DMV to ensure that we can continue operating and doing business in the state of Nevada. So thank you.
I don't see anyone in Las Vegas, and if we can go to the phone lines.
Chair, the public line is open and working. However, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for this meeting. We will not be having a growth and infrastructure meeting on Friday, and we will not have one on Monday. We will return on Wednesday, and we will start hearing bills. So at this time, meeting adjourned.